Recording in progress. Okay. Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey there, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing all right.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Mr. Eric Duffett. I teach Intro to Business at New Trier High School, and me and my class are so thankful that you're joining us so that we can learn more about the interview process. We're taking the role of HR at Bank of America for the summer analyst position, and we hope that you'll stay in character as if we are the real deal throughout the interview, and then at the end we can offer some feedback on all the candidates.
Sure. Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, great. Any questions before we get started?
I think I'm good to go.
All right. I'll introduce Chase then for the first two questions.
How you doing?
Hi, Chase. How are you?
Good. Tell us about yourself. What brings you here to this interview?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a junior at Indiana University. I'm originally from Middlebury, Indiana, so a really small town, kind of by Notre Dame area. Decided to go to IU really because I was interested in finance. And IU's finance program, specifically the investment banking workshop, which I am a part of, does a really good job of introducing kids to the concepts of finance and preparing kids for ultimately being an investment banker, which is the role that I'm pursuing here at Bank of America today. And I'm really happy to be interviewing for the position, and thank you for your time.
Yep. And second question is, how's your past experience make you qualified for this internship, especially the quantitative and analytical skills this job requires?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess I'll touch first on my freshman internship, which was at a small to mid-sized public company in northern Indiana called Patrick Industries. Patrick is kind of I'll say, random industrial company. It's not a name that most people have heard of, but what they do is they supply companies that build RVs, so recreational vehicles, and boats, mainly pontoon boats and wake boats, with essentially all of the things that they need to build those kind of vehicles. And in that internship specifically, I was an M&A intern. So I was focused on doing analysis surrounding potential new acquisitions. Patrick is a highly acquisitive company, meaning they buy a lot of smaller companies and integrate them into their system in order so they can supply more parts and better serve their customers. And so as a part of that internship, for the first half, I was doing a lot of M&A work. So looking at the financials of companies that we were planning on acquiring, doing a lot of modeling and valuation work. And then the second half of that internship, things kind of transitioned. At the time, the markets were kind of taking a downturn, and Patrick put essentially a stop on M&A activity. And us as M&A interns were kind of transitioned into more of a broader strategy role. So we were doing a lot of macroeconomic analysis for the executives so that they can make better informed decisions. We did a lot of analysis of the customers that Patrick serves, right? So they also serve manufactured housing producers, right? So we did a lot of analysis on backlogs of manufactured housing, of floor plan financing facilities for dealerships, which is kind of 2 steps down the value chain, and a lot of analysis there. And then this past summer, I was an intern at Portage Point Partners, doing restructuring work, so advising companies that were, not necessarily performing the best. In a lot of cases, these companies end up filing for Chapter 11, and there's a lot of statements of financial affairs that need to be filed with the bankruptcy courts, in addition to managing cash flows and things of that nature. So yeah, I would say those were probably the 2 largest experiences that I think make me qualified for this role at Bank of America.
All right, perfect.
Hi. Tell us about a time you took on a significant challenge and what you did to become successful.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. The first thing that comes to mind is this past semester, I was the director of curriculum for the investment banking workshop here at IU. And essentially what the investment banking workshop entails is a class that sophomores take their first semester of their sophomore year that determines their admittance to the workshop. This class is called F210, Investment Banking and Capital Markets. And it's essentially designed to teach students everything that they need to know to prepare for a career in banking, and provide them with those skill sets regardless of whether they get admitted to the investment banking workshop. And as the director of curriculum, there is a professor for the class, a faculty professor, but all of the classes are taught essentially by me, or were taught by me. And I was responsible for designing the curriculum that year, including a lot of guest lectures, so a lot of organization there, trying to find times and schedule times where professionals can come in and speak to the class. And then beyond that, designing assignments, models, exams for students. And then I also led a team of 12 other TAs to assist the students in their educational experience. I would say that's probably one of the largest experiences that I've had here at my time at IU so far, and really was kind of fundamental in helping me create leadership skills, but also great skills in taking initiative and in making plans and doing something when maybe there's a lot of uncertainty or you don't exactly know the right way to do stuff. And you kind of have to leverage your resources, meaning whatever you've learned in the past, as well as faculty and your peers, to really make a successful environment for the students.
Nice. Tell us about a time you had to work with a challenging team member, like a time where you had to work with someone who you didn't get along with well, but still need to collaborate with your group to succeed.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think anytime you have a somewhat large team, it's kind of inevitable that you're not going to get along with every person on the team. You can try, but it doesn't always work out that way. And thinking back to last semester, I'll use this as an example again. Not every so the TAs were responsible for creating essentially one assignment each. And not every TA necessarily stepped up to the plate and committed to making an assignment like that, or making an assignment that was up to the quality standards that the class needed. And so it's really just, I think the best way to handle a situation like that is positive and constructive feedback and clarity. It doesn't do any good to sit there and kind of fester about something that's not going to plan, or maybe something that you think a teammate isn't doing right. So I think having a direct line of communication, specifically with constructive feedback, is probably the best way to handle that. And that's the way I did handle it last semester, and everything ended up turning out okay.
Nice.
All right. This job requires you to juggle numerous responsibilities. Can you tell us about a time in your life where you had a lot going on and needed to prioritize effectively and be extremely efficient with your time?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm pretty involved here at IU. I think last semester was kind of when involvement peaked. I had a lot of things going on. Like I talked about, I was the director of curriculum for the IBW, still am, but also am the president of a club called Portfolio Management Club. I'm on leadership for the Restructuring and Distressed Investing Club. I'm also in Kelly Student Government, and also in TEDx here at Indiana University. And then last semester, concurrent with all of those, I was also still doing an internship at a private equity firm called Maxim Partners. And then obviously class load on top of that. So it did get pretty busy. And I think most days it's like you wake up, you work, and then you get your work done and you go to bed. I think when in terms of prioritization, my number one priority last semester was the class, right? So the director of curriculum role. And then I would say my own classes after that, which, I think it's kind of interesting prioritization there. I think it's important if you accept a role to be able to prioritize others above yourself, right? So if I accepted the role as director of curriculum, which I did, I'm at that point committed to providing this educational experience to all of the sophomores that are in the class. And if I fail to do that, that directly harms, the 500 people in the class. So it's important, was important to me that I fulfilled those needs before all the other ones. And then obviously academics and grades are super important to me, and then everything else kind of filtered down below that. And that's not to say that I slacked on any of the other things, but more just that the time commitments are such that the director of curriculum role takes more time, and then obviously the school stuff, and then everything else is as you can do with your other time commitments.
All right, great. This job requires strong skills in financial analysis using Excel. Can you tell us about the most complex project you've done with Excel?
Yeah, sure. So let me think here. I've done quite a lot of weird stuff. I think probably the most complicated thing I did was a project that I just did on a whim with a friend for a portfolio management club presentation last semester. And it was kind of a two-part project. So his part is my friend's part. He did a lot of research, and he developed a way of quantifying the industrial concentration of all of the counties in the Midwest, essentially. And what I mean by that is you look at essentially all the businesses in the US, and more specifically all the employment in each county in the US, and you figure out, okay, how much of each county is employed in a specific industry. And I'll give you an example. The county that I'm from in northern Indiana, Elkhart County, had the highest industrial concentration of any county. 60% of the county works in RV and marine manufacturing, which is all kind of the same industry. So my part of the project was developing a way of quantifying the industrial cyclicality of each of the industries that were used in his part of the analysis. So essentially what I did is I pulled the last 20 years of financials, specifically revenue numbers for I think the 2,000 largest companies in the US. And then you have to go in and clean the data. So sometimes there's a missing year. And in Excel, you can write pretty long formulas that will go in and check the cell to the right and the cell to the left. And if there's no data in the one in the middle, then it can average based on those two. And then you have to also go in and adjust for any acquisitions, right? So you have to look at specifically the organic growth of all of these companies. And that's to get a cleaner representation of what the true cyclicality of a business is. And just, I guess, as an example to kind of describe what I'm saying here, if you're looking at a company in 2008, and that company's revenues are down 50% over the prior year, but they make a massive acquisition or they merge with another company, it might inflate their revenues and say their revenues were flat, where if you adjust out for that acquisition or back out the effects of that acquisition, it would give you a better representation of the cyclicality of that business, specifically the prior to acquisition business. And so once you do all of that, you get these pretty clean numbers that represent organic revenue every year. And then you can calculate growth figures off of that. And using those growth figures, you can then calculate what I call a revenue beta. So the covariance of the market revenue, so the sum of all of the company's revenues to that specific company's revenues over the variance of all of the company's revenues. And essentially that number gives you, okay, so if the market moves by 1 unit, then this company's revenue will move by 2 units. If that would be a beta of 2, and so on and so forth. And so you can use that, and then more interestingly, you can calculate what we called in our paper upside beta and downside beta, right? So if during a recession the company has a negative beta, well, that's good because that means the market's going down, but the company's going up. And if during good times the company has a positive beta, well, that's also good because that means the revenue is going up for the market and the revenue is going up for the company. And using that kind of concept, we developed a score for the cyclicality of each industry, and then combined it with the research that I described at the beginning. And essentially what we got was a cyclicality adjusted industrial concentration score for each county. And I guess to kind of close this out, the inspiration for that paper is my friend was from Detroit, which had one of the worst impacts of the 2008 financial crisis, super high unemployment. And actually, strangely enough, the county that I'm from in Indiana had the highest unemployment of any county in the entire country during the 2008 financial crisis. And a large part in that is because these counties are very industrial. They lack a lot of industrial diversity. And on top of that, the industries that the counties are concentrated in are super cyclical, right? So the RV business is super cyclical. When the economy is bad, nobody's buying an RV. And then obviously with Detroit, it's automotive, and a similar story there. Not a lot of new car sales when the economy is bad. But yeah, I would say that's probably the most complex analysis in Excel that I've done.
All right, great. Thank you.
What are 3 financial statements and what information do they tell about a company?
Sure. Yeah. So income statement, statement of cash flows, and balance sheet. The income statement, as the name implies, gives you the revenue and then all the expenses for the business, so you can arrive at the income for the business. The balance sheet represents the assets, liabilities, and equity of a company. And then the cash flow statement ties those two together with cash flows from operations, cash flows from financing activities, and cash flows from investing activities.
In investment banking, what are the 3 most common valuation methods?
Sure. Yeah. I think DCF is number 1. And then you can also look at comparable companies analysis. And then the other one would be precedent transaction analysis.
Yo. And I want you to imagine you've been working on a project for a client and you've just now realized that you made a significant error on a calculation. However, your incorrect number is being used in a client presentation that just started in a conference room down the hall. What do you do?
Yeah, so that's a tough question. First of all, I think it depends what the number is. If the number is like the valuation of the business, that's pretty significant. And it's likely that that will be caught by the client or the management that's attending the meeting. If it's like a revenue number 4 years out, but I know the valuation is correct, I think that's a little lesser of an error. And so my reaction would be slightly different. I think in both cases, assuming I'm not in the meeting, and maybe my managing director is in the meeting, I think you have to find a way of notifying the managing director, right? You can't just barge into the meeting and be like, all right, this number's wrong, and blow up the meeting. That would not be a good look, and you'd potentially lose the client. So, any way that I could of notifying the managing director, maybe giving him a call or a text that says, hey, like, this is urgent, like, can you step out in the hallway for 2 seconds, and letting him know. And then he can, kind of strategically play around that error number in the meeting. But yeah, if the meeting's already started, I think it's there's not a whole lot you can do, but I think that is probably the best approach to resolving or at least minimizing the damage associated with the error.
Yeah. Imagine that at the end of your internship experience, we ask you to lead a group of interns in putting together a pitch presentation for a potential client. The reward for a successful presentation is that we offer you a full-time position. How would you approach this to ensure that the presentation is successful?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, if we're working with a group of other people, I think delegation of responsibilities is a pretty important thing, but not to the point where you're not talking to each other. So, I think first meeting with the team, that's the most important thing, and having multiple touch points per week with the team to talk about the status of different deliverables for the project, and how everything is going. And then beyond that, just making sure that we have kind of, I don't know, checks and balances in the process. So it's not like one person does the entire DCF analysis, and everybody just takes their word for it. I think it's a lot more beneficial to have multiple people checking and validating the work that's been done. And then obviously combining it all at the end is a pretty important task. And I think it's one that probably shouldn't be left till the end. You should probably continuously work together to make progress on the final deliverable. That way you're not putting anything significant off until the end.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Winston, and first question we have is, we have a lot of highly qualified candidates who have great experience and work extremely hard. How do you think you separate? How do you think what? What do you think separates you as a terrific candidate for this position?
Sure, yeah. Obviously, like you said, a lot of very smart, very qualified people interviewing for the role. When I think about what differentiates me from my peers, everybody obviously has a great resume, great GPA, great test scores that's competitive for a role like this. But I really think that my, I guess, intellectual curiosity and genuine interest in the work that you do as an investment banking analyst is something that sets me apart. And I think that's extraordinarily beneficial on the job. It's no secret that, in investment banking, you work very long hours. And not everything is necessarily the most glamorous task, especially as an analyst. But having an underlying appreciation for the work that you're doing, and underlying interest in the work that you're doing, I think goes a long way to I guess, giving you the drive to be as successful and be as good of an analyst as you can be. And so, yeah, I would say intellectual curiosity and genuine interest are the two things that I think set me apart the most.
All right, tell us a little bit more about horology. How did you get into it, and what is it about horology that you enjoy?
Sure, yeah. So I guess horology, just generally speaking, is the study of time, but it's a term that's used to describe people that essentially like watches. So growing up, my dad was always pretty into watches, specifically Seikos, and I kind of, I guess, just through osmosis and through being near him, developed an interest in that as well. I actually just, I guess, spent my signing bonus for this summer's internship on a Grand Seiko, so pretty excited about that. I think really, I guess, like, a lot of people describe watches as like jewelry for men, and I think it's very true, but I enjoy more than anything kind of the mechanical aspect. The idea that you can wear something self-contained on your wrist, that is going to tell the time accurately for I don't know, an indefinite period of time, right? No batteries, no electricity, nothing like that. I think it's something that's pretty special, and it's probably the main driver of that interest.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Last couple for you. One, I know it's typical during the interview process for the candidate to have some questions of the company. And even though we don't necessarily have the answers for you, like, what is a question or two that's on your mind as you begin the interview process with any investment bank?
Sure, yeah. So assuming that I'm interviewing with like an investment banking analyst, one of my favorite questions to ask in these interviews is, what is your favorite memory with your analyst class? You can also ask, like, what's your favorite deal that you worked on? How has the culture at Bank of America formed your experience? And what does mentorship look like at Bank of America? I guess there are several that I threw at you there, but I think those are typically my go-tos for these interviews.
Great. And then lastly, is there anything we didn't ask you about or a question we didn't ask that you wish we would have?
Yeah, let me think about that. Yeah, I mean, I like the like what sets you apart question. That's usually a question that gets asked. I like the interest questions. Again, that stuff usually comes up. I think maybe like most impactful experience that I guess led you to choose investment banking, or why are you interested in investment banking? I think is probably the main one that usually gets asked, that I don't think that was asked here. Or why Bank of America would be another one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think our first question is meant to kind of pick at those ideas, but maybe it could be more clearly worded that that's what we're asking for.
Sure.
So thanks again for the time. So I have about 30 groups of students who are evaluating these interviews and are going to provide feedback. We're new at this, or they're new at this. I've been in several real interviews. So we're happy to share any feedback. Just let us know what you're interested in, and we'll have some results for you here in a week or two.
Sure. Yeah, sounds great.
Great.
Happy to help. And hope it's helpful for the students in their education, I guess.
Definitely. So thank you, Andrew. Have a good weekend.
Yeah. Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.